It's Wednesday. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Tour, book tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee on tech. Every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., the SCWA turns our Facebook page over to a new and different writer to talk about their work and their books. This morning, we are honored to have with us James Bartlett. Originally from London, James has been published in over 100 magazines and newspapers, including the LA Times, LA Weekly, Atlas Obscura, American Way, Skylife, Hemispheres, Guardian, Telegraph, Variety, and Bazaar. Did we miss anybody in the whole writing world?
Well, you know, it always changes. Over the last year and a half, like half of those are closed down. So, but no, that's the number is the important thing. I'm always trying to keep with the numbers.
All right, let's see. So he also writes for BBC.com, blogs for BBCAmerican.com, and posts the latest LA murders and mysteries at gourmetghost.com on Facebook and Twitter. All right, so we got through that. Good morning, James. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Well, since we are the Southern California Writers Association, and a lot of what you write about is LA based, talk a little bit about why. Well, let's talk about your books, the Gourmet Ghost books, and what brought you to the topics and why you wanted to do all the extensive research that you do to produce these books.
Yeah, well, I guess, as you said, I'm not from here. I'm from England.
We never would have guessed.
Yes, you would never have guessed, just as you can tell from my accent. And so, of course, I moved to LA, and like a lot of people, when they first move here, they do find it a little overwhelming. You know, the city's so large, it's so spread out. It's difficult to kind of get your bearings a little bit. And so I tried to get to know my local surroundings a little. And of course, being English, that meant going to a lot of pubs and bars and finding out where the happy hours are, that kind of thing. And I was in a bar during a happy hour, and I was talking to the bartender, and he told me a story that the bar that I was in was haunted. It had a ghost story, and that there was also a tunnel underneath that connected it to the movie studio opposite, and other stories like that. And that really started it all off. Now, I work as a journalist, so I didn't entirely take his word for all the stories he told me straight away. So I started to do research in the LA Times archives, which, thank goodness, are available via the LA Public Library website. And I started to look into some of the stories that he told me to see if there was any truth in them, you know, because they're ghost stories or stories of murder or crime, to see if anything like that really happened. And that really set me off on a long trail, which I guess I'm still on now, 2 books in. And it was meant to be an article just initially about this story that I'd heard at a bar. And it just carried on and on and on. And I just started collecting these stories, going to these other bars and restaurants and hotels. And I found that there wasn't really a guide like this for Los Angeles, a guide to bars and restaurants and hotels where you could go for a drink or a meal, but a guide that also told some of the unknown stories, the darker stories, you know, the hidden stories about ghosts or murders or weird things that had happened there. And it turns out there's a lot more than you realize. And then eventually, after a while, I started to compile them all. And my wife said, look, you should really put this into a book. If there's nothing out there that's like this, you should put it into a book. And I thought, well, nobody's going to want this. You know, who's going to be interested in that? But luckily, you know, it turned out that quite a lot of people were. So here's the cover. So that was the first book I did. It was called Gourmet Ghosts. You know, gourmet because it's food and drink, obviously.
Love it.
And ghosts, because I got a lot of ghost stories from witnesses, mainly from witnesses, and some from the newspapers. And some that were apocryphal, but that was really important to me, was that I didn't just do the they said that, the story goes that, you know, because then you could just make it up. I really tried to look in the archives to see if there was any connection between the hotel or the restaurant to the story. And 9 times out of 10, there was a connection. There was a connection between the story I'd been told and something that had happened in the past.
So you seem like such a nice person, James. Yet somehow everything, or not everything, but a lot of what you write pertains to crime or has some connection to crime. You do a book discussion, the crime, right?
Yeah, book club, yes.
The book club, and you write about I guess a lot of the stories in here have to do with unfortunate circumstances that befell people in some of these locations. So what is it about those sorts of topics that you think attract people? Why do you think people are so interested in your books and the stories that you write?
Well, I think as we all know, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Everybody loves a good murder story or a good horror story, like horror movies. Everybody loves a bit of scandal or something that's unexplained. And also you have to remember 100 years ago, you could buy poison at the corner store. Everybody could buy poison. It was
Oh, the good old days.
The good old days. I mean, I think life was much more exciting then, or more dangerous, certainly, probably. But it was a different time. And I think today, I think especially the last few years, we've all got so kind of anesthetized to bad news and to shootings and to stabbings and so forth as being a way of life. It just seems somewhat strangely comforting to go into the past and see how very different it was. And again, it was also related to me learning about LA, and the history of LA was that I was trying to find out about what the place was like 100 years ago. And that was part of life here. Murder and crime was part of life here.
And people put effort into it.
They really did. I mean, because there was much more of a chance then that you could get away with it.
Mhm.
Unlike today, where we just assume DNA fixes everything and fingerprints fix everything and DNA fixes everything, which is not the case. 100 years ago, there's nothing like that. Even the barest of fingerprinting, he'd even not come in. So you had a really good chance of, if you had a nefarious intent, you could get away with murder. You could murder your wife, you could murder your husband, you could kill somebody and steal their money. And you had a good chance of getting away with it. And that just became, there was a wave as well with podcasts and televisions and movies about true crime. And that actually led to the second book, Gourmet Ghost 2, not such an original title, but that
but on point.
It was Gourmet Ghost 2, and that was more about true crime. And I really found that people really liked the true crime angle. They really wanted to know, what happened 100 years ago. And some of the strangest stories, as I'm sure a lot of your writers and watchers here have found out, some of the strangest stories really come from what human beings do. You couldn't make them up.
What was the strangest thing or the most interesting thing that you found when you were doing research for this, or the story that hooked you?
There were several. I mean, there's lots of them that are really, really interesting and strange. The ones that really hooked me, and in terms of a ghost story, first, obviously it's up to individuals whether they believe in ghosts or not. But I was looking for something, factual evidence of a kind, which of course is almost impossible to get. But there was a story that I got told in relation to the building where the last bookstore is, which I was going to as soon as it opened about 10 years ago. And the caretaker of that building told me that before the last bookstore was there and downtown had its sort of renaissance, he was the caretaker of the building and it was largely empty. And he used to go around and every night and check the floors and just make sure that there was no one there and that there'd been no break-ins or whatever. And he told me a story one night about something that he saw and a ghost that he saw that really made me think, wow, I believe him. I mean, I believed everyone I spoke to. And I looked it up in the archives, I looked up the building, and his story almost matched exactly the death of a man who died in the late 20s. And it was so creepy. And there was no way he could have known about it. There's no way he could have known that that happened. That was a story that was amazing. There was a story at the Alexandria Hotel, which is just opposite the last bookstore, actually, about a man who faked his own death with poison. He went to an elaborate hoax of arriving with a wife and 2 sets of luggage and booking a room and ordering dinner for 2 and then being poisoned and there being a big hunt for his wife, who was actually described in the newspapers as a ghost woman. And it turned out that she didn't exist at all. He planned the whole thing and set it up and committed suicide himself, but had tried to make it seem that it was someone else who'd done it. There were some hoaxes. There was the Cecil Hotel, which I cover extensively in the second book. That's the very famous hotel now. About 10 years ago, where the poor girl, the student, drowned in the water tank. on the top of the hotel. That was an enormous story at the time. But that hotel, by far and away, has the most amount of murders and suicides. And every hotel has murders and suicides, I'm afraid. That is a fact.
I'm sure the hotel industry is happy that you shared that fact.
Yeah, it's some hotels embrace their past. I was careful in the books not to go past about 1980. I thought that's in modern times. I thought, a murder that happened 100 years ago, that's not really going to affect people today. But as you said, there's such an audience for this. People will go to hotels and ask to stay in certain rooms and ask about certain crimes and want to know about it and go there because of that. And the Cecil Hotel in downtown is an extraordinary place. And I can't explain why so many people have died there.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be checking in to find out.
No.
I'll read your book. So I have to say this. I found this review, which was, I found this book to be a fun, juicy read, perfect literary candy to zone out with after a long day. And I thought, boy, what better review could you have of a book like that? So we have a few minutes. So let's talk about the book that you're working on now.
It actually was born out of Gourmet Ghost 2, actually, surprisingly enough. It was a story I found that related to a hotel in Hollywood. It's not a hotel anymore, but it was a very, very fancy hotel back in the day. The building still exists. You probably know it, any of you, if you've been up to Hollywood recently. It's just near Hollywood and Vine. And there was a suicide there back in the 50s of a young woman who had been accused of murdering her husband. And she had come down from Alaska, from Fairbanks in Alaska, after being accused of murdering him in their bedroom the year before, about 6 months before. And the trial was about to happen, and she was unable to face the trial, and she killed herself. And I read the story, and the more I read about it, I put it in the book. The more I read about it, the more I was intrigued as to what had happened, because at the time she was accused of murder alongside her lover, who was an African-American guy, a musician. That was a bigger scandal than the murder, really, in the 1950s. And so I just went down a rabbit hole, which is now 5 years of going down the rabbit hole. And I've now spoken to family members and children and grandchildren and been to Fairbanks. And it's a new book. It's called The Alaskan Blonde, because obviously she's from Alaska and she was a blonde. And it's been out to agents and publishers for most of this year. I had no idea they take so long to read things, but there has been strong interest from a publisher and a couple of agents, which is really nice. And I don't have a cover. I mean, I have a mock-up cover that I'd like to be mine, but I've done the obligatory buttons. The Alaskan Blonde. You see, that's the obligatory button. That's the Alaskan Blonde. Her name's Diane Wells.
That's the face right there.
That's her, yes.
Yeah.
And the cover I want to do, that's the picture that was amazed me, that's her with the paparazzi.
That expression.
Yeah. And so they're all from the same shoot. I mean, it was a big sensation in the States, especially, but it got reported around the world as well. And that was the unusual thing, because at the time, this is the early 50s, no one really knew anything about Alaska at all. For any story that happened in Alaska to make it into, the New York or the LA papers was very unusual. But the angle here, the love affair was a huge story. And, 5 years down, that's the next book, which by hook or by crook is coming out next year.
Yeah, well, I'm excited because I know we've talked about that before, and I cannot wait for it. So
it's really good. I mean, of course, everyone says that about themselves, but we all try and write something that we would like to write ourselves. That's certainly what I did with the Gourmet Ghost books, because I wanted a book like this. So I ended up writing it. And this book, when I found out about the story of Diane Wells and the murder of her husband, I thought, well, where's the book? There has to be a book about that. I would read a book about that. And so I ended up, writing one, and I hope people find it as interesting as I do.
I'm sure they will. I'm excited for you. I will keep my fingers crossed. I know this feels like a passion project.
Yeah, it's been really interesting talking to the children. I mean, the children are in their 80s now. And, you know, they're all like, we really don't know what happened. We really don't know a lot about the story. No one ever talked about it. It got brushed under the carpet because of statehood. In 1959, Alaska became a state and the whole story kind of disappeared. And so they wanted to know what had happened. I just assumed they would know and would tell me. And it turned out that wasn't quite the case.
Well, I'm sure that they will buy the book as well.
Yes.
But so where can people get Gourmet Ghosts 1 and 2?
Well, Gourmet Ghosts is obviously available on Amazon, and other online retailers are available. It's also available at quite a few bookstores and souvenir stores and some hotels across LA. I was quite surprised. The library gift store downtown has it. There's a number of other local bookstores and like local craft stores that sell it. Some hotels near the airport. It's kind of comes into the travel guidey bit as well. So there's a fair few places, but you can find all about that on the website, which is gourmetghosts.com. There's a link as to where you can buy it and actually go and buy it yourself. But if people want to contact me, I will sign a copy and mail it to them with free shipping.
See, that in itself would be worth it.
Yes.
So
whatever you want as a message. It's coming up to Halloween, so.
Oh, that's right. This is a perfect read for Halloween.
Yeah.
So before we say goodbye to you, you have a upcoming event.
Yeah, there is. Obviously, Halloween's always a busy time for me this year. I mean, it's still all online, all these events, of course, unfortunately. But I am doing an event on the 28th, and it's within the LA Public Library system. So anyone who's a library member, in fact, since it's online, I don't even know if you need to be a member to log in, but I'm doing a Halloween talk at the Edendale. Well, I'm not doing it at the library, but it's online for the Edendale Library, which is up on Sunset Boulevard on the 28th at 6 o'clock. It's free, obviously, because it's a Zoom talk. And I think if you just register with them, send them an email, or you can do it through Eventbrite. And I'll be talking for about an hour about more stories from the 2 books, and it'll be illustrated. And then you'll get a bit more of a sense of some more stories.
Wow. All right. Well, great. We're looking forward to that. Best of luck. Best
Thank
of
you.
luck with Alaskan Blonde. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for being here. If you can, if you're looking for something great, a Halloween read, please pick up James's books. If you can't, they're around. Please leave a review. Reviews are appreciated as well. So please support him and us. And you can also, if you have friends that you think would enjoy this interview, you can share this interview. You can also go to our online YouTube channel at SCWA Writers Online and see this interview with James and 50 other or so of our mutual friends. So until next week, I hope everybody has a great week. Keep writing, keep reading, and we will see you soon. Bye. Bye, James.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.